second wave of Islamization started in the 11th century with the Turkish tribes. So all these regions of Eastern Europe, Greece, Anatolia, which is now Turkey, but was the seat of the Christian Byzantine Empire, and Serbia, Bulgaria, Romania were integrated into the Dar el-Islam, which is the land of Islam. So all the countries around the Mediterranean, which once have been Christian, became the Islamic Empire. This Turkish wave lasted from the 11th century till the 17th century, where the Turkish army were stopped at the gate of Vienna in 1683.
The Crusades are not understood in Muslim world today very differently to the way they are understood in the Western academia and in the discourse of the Western elite class. Both talk of the Crusades as an aggressive war of conquest by Christian Europe against peaceful, innocent Muslims. One may ask, however, what were those Muslims doing in the Holy Land in the first place? Well, what happened is that Muhammad and his successors waged a series of wars of conquest, and in one such onslaught, in the 4th decade of the 7th century, the Holy Land, Palestine, Israel, was conquered by Muslims. And so when Seljuk Turks started interfering with the ability of Christian pilgrims to go to the Holy Land, to go to Jerusalem, and when their physical safety was no longer guaranteed, the Western Christians acted not only as reconquerors of a land that had been once theirs, they also acted as, quite rightly one might say, protectors of their holy places. Now, a defensive war in the case of the Muslims is even a war of conquest, because they're obligated to spread Islam. But a land which had once been Muslim, in particular, must be reconquered, and the jihad is the rightful name of that war of reconquest. So they could never accept the Crusader states in Antiochia and Jerusalem, because they were Dar ul-Harb reinstated into Dar ul-Islam. And this is a contemporary aspect of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, of which many Westerners are not fully aware. Exactly the same psychology that prompted Saladin and others to fight the Crusaders is now motivating Hamas. In both cases, it is not only a matter of the nationalistic desire of Arabs to expel European or Jewish settlers, it is also the Quranic obligation of all good Muslims to make sure that the land once ruled by Muslims will be reverted to their rule.
From the British historian Hilaire Belloc's The Great Heresies, 1938. It has always seemed to me possible, and even probable, that there would be a resurrection of Islam, and that our sons or our grandsons would see the renewal of that tremendous struggle between the Christian culture and what has been for more than 1,000 years its greatest opponent. The suggestion that Islam may re-arise sounds fantastic, but this is only because men are always powerfully affected by the immediate past. One might say that they are blinded by it. But not so very long ago, less than 100 years before the Declaration of Independence, Vienna was almost taken, and only saved by the Christian army under the command of the King of Poland, on a date that ought to be among the most famous in history. September 11th, 1683.
On September 11, 1683, the siege of Vienna was broken. That was the high point of Islamic Jihad expansion into Europe. After that, Islam went into decline, and the Islamic world was colonized and in a drastically weakened state. It seems very likely, almost certain as far as I'm concerned, that Osama bin Laden chose September 11th in 2001 to signal that the decline of the Islamic world was over and that the jihadists were back and were going to pick up where they left off in Vienna in 1683.
If we look at the tectonic plates between Islamic world and non-Islamic world today, we notice something very interesting, that even very diverse Muslim societies, which cannot be easily branded under one civilizational label, have something in common, and it is the tendency to be in conflict with their neighbors. If we look at the extreme southeastern outreach of Islam, we see East Timor, where Indonesian Muslims slaughtered a third of the population of this former Portuguese colony, who are, by the way, Roman Catholics. In southern Philippines, we see an extremely violent Islamic rebellion, which has been simmering and becoming more or less violent for years. In Indonesia itself, we had religious conflict in the Spice Islands, where the beleaguered Christian minority is in danger of extinction. We have very active Islamic movements both in Thailand and in China, in Xinjiang. In the Indian subcontinent, the history is tragic indeed. That's where the Holocaust, the Hindu Holocaust, took place in medieval times, a little-known episode in the history of Islam in the Western world, but the one that left a deep traumatic mark on the people of the region, and where the conflict is still latently present in the province of Kashmir. In Africa, there is the constant war in Sudan, which finally has gained some prominence in the Western decision-making circles, but which has been going on for 20 years. And it's impossible to estimate the number of lives it has claimed, but it certainly goes into many hundreds of thousands. There is the constant instability in Nigeria between the resurgent central and northern states, which are increasingly pressurizing the government in Lagos into accepting Sharia law as the law of the land in those provinces. And of course there is Mauritania, where Muslims constantly battle non-Muslim southerners. Then there is of course the Caucasus, Chechnya. And in Europe itself we have the conflict in the former Yugoslavia between the Bosnian Muslims and Serbs and Croats respectively, and the conflict between the Albanians and the Serbs, Albanians and Macedonians, and quite possibly before too long, Albanians and Greeks. So if we eliminate these conflicts, if we eliminate from the equation Chechnya, the Balkans, Sudan, the world is a pretty peaceful place. If we eliminate from the terrorist equation, terrorist acts carried out by the Muslims over the past 5 years, we would come to realize that the war on terror is unnecessary because terror is not a very big problem.